Hello, and welcome to Gunfighter Life. This episode is going to be a little bit different. This is an episode for not gunfighters on Gunfighter Life. The podcast where we talk about guns and gunfighting tactics the right way with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am your host, Michael Milito. First and foremost, I'm a servant of God and a follower of Jesus Christ. I'm going to do a version of the bio because I think it's germane to today's topic. Started competition shooting and was a state gold medalist even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. Started early in my competition shooting days. Joined the Marine Corps combat veteran a couple of times over. Was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. So served in two branches of the armed forces, also law enforcement. LAPD, I was a sworn peace officer. I worked regular, what you would call patrol. I also worked more specialized assignments, fugitive recovery, manhunting, if you will, and served in some more specialized roles with some three-letter government agency stuff that I won't specify. I'm an FBI certified handgun instructor, NRA instructor, another three-letter government agency, hold a bunch of certificates with them, up to and including advanced weapons instructor. I won't specify which agency that is. I've also been a private contractor for a three-letter government agency. I won't specify. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times. A few different states, a few separate times. West Coast Regional Rifle Champion, and I've been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. All that stuff is by the grace of God. He's given me those talents, and like the Bible says, if you're given a talent, you're supposed to use it and develop it. To he who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But he who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, and have hunted ever since I was a boy all over this beautiful country. If I sound a little winded, it's because I'm doing a ruck march and I'm on my way back into town. You may even hear some cars pass by, but hopefully you'll forgive the ambiance on this ruck march because I thought I could help some people out. And while it was fresh on my mind and I probably had about an hour-ish of rucking left, I thought it'd be a good time to record an episode. An episode that's different. An episode for not gun people. An episode for you, if you're a regular listener, to absorb and maybe take my advice. You don't have to agree with everything I say, right? You shouldn't be a robot and agree with everything that I say. But hopefully you will take what I say and kind of dissect it, and hopefully you see where I'm coming from. Because if you're a shooter, hopefully you're trying to take other people shooting and get other people into shooting. Whether that be a woman who, has a restraining order from a guy that's bothering her, or a young child that wants to get into shooting, or one of your kids, or who knows what that could be, right? It could be a cousin, whomever. So I'm going to give some advice for some different categories on people that aren't gunfighters, right? They don't live and breathe this stuff all the time. A couple of different scenarios. I'll give some of my thoughts for good options. So you can take this and absorb it and hopefully remember it if somebody asks you, hey, this is my scenario, this is my situation, what do you recommend? And you could say, I kind of remember this from this episode. Maybe I should take that advice. Or I kind of like it, but I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. That's fine. Or, as Jesus says, no prophet has honor in his own country. Perhaps you just want to share the episode with somebody. And maybe you've told them something and they won't heed it. And maybe you and I agree. And you're like, well, listen to this guy. He's got some street cred, right? He's got some bona fides in the gun world. So for those reasons, I want to do this podcast. Without further ado, let us march on. Me actually march on down this road, literally on this ruck march, and you metaphorically march down this path with me on new shooters, not gunfighters, and some advice. Okay, the first one, sadly, is all too common, I think, in today's world. A woman with a restraining order. You might imagine, surmise from my time in law enforcement, that I've dealt with that. A woman with a restraining order. Now, here's the thing. A restraining order is a piece of paper. If a man wants to do a woman harm, and he's willing to violate the law, that restraining order doesn't really do a whole lot in the moment. It might help if, hopefully, nothing physically bad happens to that woman. It may help in court later, but that's a piece of paper. And paper doesn't stop bullets. Paper doesn't stop knives. Paper doesn't stop fists. It doesn't stop violence. It's a piece of paper. So, woman is in fear. Okay, so here's the thing. Hopefully you live in a free state where a woman can carry a gun. Okay, but in a lot of states, they have to have a concealed carry permit. So, is the woman, number one, even going to be able to carry a firearm on her person? Does she want to? Because even if she's legally allowed to, she may not feel comfortable doing it. She may just, and that's a lot, right? If she just got a restraining order right now. So my first thing is, if she's worried about the person coming to her home. So for home defense, of all the options, okay, you'll know if you listen for any length of time, I'm a big fan of the shotgun. A lot of women want to gravitate towards the handgun because it's small. But handguns are the hardest gun to master. They just are. They require the most amount to get proficient, and they require the most amount of diligence to stay proficient. Okay, and they're inherently less effective. They are less effective than long guns, either rifles or shotguns, for effectiveness. And they're harder to use. So if it's for the home, I'm going to recommend a shotgun. I'm going to recommend a 20 gauge, not because I'm so sexist I don't think there aren't women out there that can run a 12 gauge like a champ, but because the 20 gauge is plenty, right? The 20 gauge is plenty of gauge for human targets with the proper load, which would be number 3, number 4-ish buckshot if you're asking me. I'm going to recommend a youth model. And not because I'm sexist, but because if you're not talking about a traditional shotgun stance, if you're talking about a modern fighting stance with a shotgun where you're more square to the target, in general, I like running, even for me, shorter stocks anyway. The youth model is going to be light and handy. It's also generally going to have a shorter stock, which would be good for men too. A good 20 gauge pump shotgun, if I'm recommending one today, it's going to be either a Maverick 88 or a Mossberg 500. The Maverick 88 just being a slightly less expensive but still very good version of the Mossberg 500. So either one of those, 20 gauge youth model. The 20 gauge with buckshot is absolutely devastating and is going to be far, far more effective than 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP. Any of your common handgun rounds, it's going to be a great choice for home defense, right? I just think it is. And you can disagree with that, and I just think that's the best choice. If you wanted to go a different route, that's on you. But if you're asking me for my choice for a woman for home defense, she wants something for her home. Maybe she has a restraining order. Maybe she just wants to be able to protect her family and things like that. The shotgun. And how much time is she going to dedicate to training? Because I'm fairly confident that, and you've heard my background, I've also been an instructor for I don't know how many civilian law enforcement military. I'm fairly confident that with a decent trainer, I can take a woman and in an afternoon have her fairly proficient at home defense ranges with a shotgun, with a pump shotgun, with a youth model 20 gauge shotgun. It's plenty of power. It's plenty effective. They're not prohibitively expensive in the world of firearms. So that'd be my number one choice if it's for home defense. Or for like, if she wanted something for to be more prepared for some kind of major disaster, a shotgun. Now, if she wants something, she's willing to carry something on her person, in her vehicle, on her person, whatever it is, then you're probably talking a handgun. And this is where I might get some flack, might get some heat, but no, I'm not going to recommend a Glock 42. I'm not going to recommend a Smith & Wesson Easy Shield. I'm going to recommend a revolver, but not the one that often gets pushed behind a gun counter to a lot of women, and not for the reasons that it's often pushed. How misogynistic is it to think that a woman can't quickly and easily learn to run a semi-automatic handgun? I think that's kind of a metaphorical slap in the face to a woman. You're talking about a woman that probably controls a multi-thousand-pound vehicle on her way to work while talking on a cell phone with one hand and drinking a soy mocha chai latte. I don't know if that's a real drink, from a fancy coffee shop with the other hand while navigating a multi-thousand-pound vehicle down the road. If a woman can do that, she can probably load rounds in magazine, put magazine in gun, rack slide. Right? I mean, this is not rocket science, as much as you might want to think that you're super intelligent and tactical to be able to run a semi-automatic handgun. It's not that hard, man. So if you're talking about for a woman, that's not the reason I'm not recommending a semi-auto. Here's a couple reasons, and not a little tiny lightweight Smith & Wesson J-frame. I think that's a pretty poor choice for a woman, especially in the common 38 Special, because a super lightweight, let's say a Smith & Wesson Airweight or something like it, because they're so small, they have a fair amount of recoil. They're not the most fun gun to shoot. They have a small sight radius. They're a good gun. They're one of my favorite pocket carry guns, but they're more of a master intermediate gun, not a beginner gun. I would say a medium frame, medium-sized revolver that is enjoyable to shoot, that is accurate for a new shooter. I mean, mechanically, the snub-nose revolver is very accurate, but for the accuracy of the shooter being able to get hits on target, again, they're more of an intermediate to advanced gunman's gun. But a medium-sized revolver, something like a K-frame or an L-frame, a Kel-frame. I kind of wanted to put those two letters together and make my own letter. But a K or an L frame or something like a medium frame, and especially on today's market, the police surplus, there's plenty of those older like Smith & Wesson Model 10s and things like that kicking around. And you got to think those were used by police officers. And as much as we might like to envision, and this is from a former police officer, most cops as being gunfighters, they're not. They're administrators that happen to have a gun in case something goes wrong. Ask your average cop how much time they spend at the range training, and I'm talking an average patrol cop, right? Not like a SWAT cop. How much time they spend at the range training and gunfighting stuff, and how much they spend behind a keyboard or a steering wheel or with a pen in their hand. There's no comparison. And they used for decades and decades a medium-sized, let's say 4-inch barrel, medium-sized wheel gun in 38 Special. That's a fine choice for a woman's handgun if she wants a handgun instead of the shotgun, but not the little snub-nosed revolvers, right? That's not the gun. But right, with 38 Specials, cops use 38 Specials, just standard pressure 38 Specials for decades and decades. I think it's a good, solid choice for a woman that doesn't want to go the long gun route, doesn't want the shotgun, but she wants a gun for in the home, but she wants it to be a handgun. Maybe she's going to carry it in her vehicle, because in some states you can carry a gun in a vehicle without a concealed carry permit, not necessarily on her person. I think that is a good choice. And not because she can't operate a semi-auto, but here's the thing. I know this, I think this is from experience. There are a lot, not all, but a lot of new shooters are not comfortable carrying a semi-auto on their person or even in their vehicle or in their house with a round in the chamber. It just makes them uncomfortable. You can say that's silly or whatever, but if they're not going to do it, for them, that's their reality, right? They're not going to carry that gun with a round in the chamber. They're not going to carry a semi-auto with a round in the chamber. They're not maybe going to have it in their car with a round in the chamber. I would absolutely rather have said woman with a medium-sized revolver that's fully loaded than a gun that when she's panicking has to remember to chamber a round. And again, a medium-sized revolver with double action. A double action revolver means you can shoot a double action or single action with 38 specials. Is a pretty fun gun to shoot. It's fairly common ammo, and again, police officers use those for decades. It's not like they're not effective. So if she wants a gun for the house, for the car, for something like that off-body carry, that's going to be my recommendation. Now, if she's super serious, if you got a female that's super serious, she's going to be diligent and carry. She's going to find a way that she's going to carry, in a belly band or one of those concealed carry shirts, or even the kind of women's pants they make for a carry. There's all kinds of products. And I'm not talking about a purse. That's off-body carry. I would still gravitate towards that medium-sized revolver. Then we start moving into the super subcompact semi-auto world. And then you can look at those, but you got to remember that handguns are already a compromise, right? If you told me today I had to get in a gunfight to save somebody's life, I don't want a handgun, right? For almost no situation is a handgun a better choice, right? You want a shotgun, or if it's longer range or whatever, you may want a carbine or a rifle, but you certainly don't want a handgun. That's a compromise. A super subcompact handgun is less effective than a full-size fighting handgun. You get less velocity out of the same cartridge because you're chopping off barrel length. They're, in general, harder to shoot, harder to manipulate, harder to clear malfunctions. It's a compromise of a compromise. So I'd only go there if that's what this person, this female that wanted to be protected, was going to be serious about carrying on body with a round in the chamber. In which case, then I would go to a super small subcompact semi-auto, whatever they were comfortable for carry. In fact, I'm on my way rucking back to my wife now, who is a very beautiful, small, petite wife that I'm blessed to be married to. And for her, we went through this with her. She does a lot of hiking and running. And I don't mean just like jogging around the block. I mean like she runs marathons. She's run many marathons. She ran a half marathon not that long ago. And her biggest gun that she's comfortable with is the Glock 42. We went to a range, had her try out a bunch of different stuff, which is what I would recommend for you. She wasn't a new shooter. She had a gun, a firearm before I met her. But for carry gun, she chose the Glock 42, but she tried a couple of different things. And that's what I would recommend that you do with said female. If you really want them to get into shooting, don't just say you should get this. Take them to a range, right? Find a range, take them to it. Or if you have like a menagerie of small carry guns, but take her to a range. Let her shoot a couple of different guns and a couple of different calibers. Recoil, you'd be surprised. I've seen some little ladies that can handle recoil like a boss. And I've seen some big, burly men that are just recoil shy. I don't think that it's as much a physical thing as a mental thing. So take them to the range. Maybe they end up with a Ruger LCP in 22, in which case I'd say that's far better than having no gun. Or maybe they end up with a Ruger LCP in 380 or a Ruger SR9. And those are all just Rugers. I'm just rattling them off, right? Could be a Glock 42, a Glock 43. There's so many options. But if she's set on that, I would say go to the range. And if you're really serious, pay for her. Pay for her range time, pay for some gun rentals, and have her try some stuff. Also, then she feels like and feelings are a big thing of women's decisions, right? Then she feels like she chose that gun. It's the right gun for her, and she's comfortable with it. Not just something somebody else told her she should have. There's a difference there, right? That's my advice on that. And I spent way more time on that than I thought, right? I thought that was going to be a quick answer. But woman who wants to defend herself, has a restraining order, or just feels like she wants to be able to protect those around her, herself, and those under her. So there you go. Next, a child that you want to get into shooting. A young person that you want to get into shooting. So what I'm going to recommend for this is going to be a long gun in 22. A couple of reasons for the long gun. One, again, long guns are easier to shoot, so they're going to have more fun. They're going to hit more stuff Two, it's a lot harder for them to shoot themselves with a long gun than with a handgun. You should be there, you should be in control, but for a lot of reasons, start them off with a long gun. 22 for a lot of reasons. It's the cheapest of the ammo. Okay, it's the cheapest of the ammo. It is very low recoil, right? So for a lot of those reasons, a lot of fun. And I'm not going to tell you to start with the Ruger 1022. It's a great gun. It'd be a great gun, but for a first gun, to get a kid into shooting, I think a bolt action or a lever action is a better option. It's going to slow them down. It's going to, I think, instill the fundamentals more. If you just want, you're the kind of shooter that just goes to the range and busts out rounds. Like I've known guys like that, and I love those. I love these guys. They were friends of mine. They would just go to the range and just shoot rounds, right? And practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. You could go to the range and shoot 500 rounds and be worse than when you got there. That's just a reality if you're not practicing good, solid fundamentals. I think if you want the kid to have a firm foundation, you start them with a manually operated gun. There's nothing wrong with a single shot, especially if they're more towards the younger age, like the 7, 8, 9 range. And whatever age is right for your kid, you need to judge your kid on that, or your nephew or your niece on that, right? You be the judge of that. There are some 7-year-olds, absolutely. There are some 7-year-olds, no way would I give them a gun. You have to kind of know that and know that child, right? Not all 7-year-olds, not all 12-year-olds are created equal. There are some people that probably should never have a gun ever. I think they should have the right to carry a gun, but I think wisdom should dictate some people just aren't cut out for a gun. It's not for everybody, right? There's a certain very small percentage of the population that are serial killers. I forget what the number was, but I remember when I was in, I think, the police academy, they said that there's a certain number of active serial killers in the country at any one time, right? Those guys should never have a gun. So some people obviously are never there, but kids come into that age at different times. And I've taught quite a few youth classes, right? It's not a thing. It's not like, okay, you're 7, you're ready for this gun, and you're 12, you're ready for this gun. That's not how that works. But if you're starting on the younger age, I would go towards a Keystone Cricket. That's a really cool one. I would go towards a Savage Rascal. The Keystone Cricket they're both single shots, but the Keystone Cricket, not only do you have to put the round in and work the bolt, but you have to cock it. So it's kind of even slower than a normal single shot. So it's a great first gun. They're great, they're accurate, they have good sights on them. If your kid really likes history and like World War I, World War II type stuff, Keystone even makes one that looks like a little baby Mosin Nagant, which is really cool. So if they're into the history stuff, if they're really into history and you want to get them into guns, that'd be a really cool thing to have. And in fact, I have a Savage Rascal that I still take out and use. It's a great little gun. It helps me with the fundamentals, right? It's this little single shot 22. A great first gun. If you want to spend a little bit more and you want the kid's a little bit older, and read your kid, right? If your kid is the kind of kid that doesn't really take care of stuff, leaves it out in the rain, trashes it, may not be worth it. Maybe wait till they get a little bit older. But if they really take care of stuff and you want to get them that first gun that they're going to have and take care of and pass down. My first gun was not what you would call a high quality gun, but I kept it and I used it and I handed it down to my nephew when it was time because it was given to me by my uncle. You kind of got to know, right? But there's a couple options there. The Browning bolt action 22, if you want to go with like a higher end. The CZ bolt action 22s are exquisite. And if you can find a Ruger 77 22, all of those are really good options if you want a good bolt action 22. If you want a lever action because your kid's into cowboy stuff or you just like lever actions, that's also a good option. Also fairly safe, especially with the exposed hammer, because you can look at a glance. If you're their instructor, you can look and see if that gun's hammer is back or not. So that's a good thing. And for those, you get the Henry 22s. Those are really good options. They also have the added benefit. A lot of those are marked that they'll shoot shorts, longs, and long rifles. So if your kid is even a little bit recoil shy, even with a 22, not so much for the recoil because there'd be almost none, but for the noise, you can load it up with CB caps or 22 shorts and it'll be super quiet. So there's the Henry ones of those, and if you want, in my opinion, a little bit nicer fit and finish, they make the nicer versions of the Henrys, like the Silver Boy, I think, or the ones with the shiny receivers, if that's what you want. Or you can get the Browning. Again, Browning makes really nice 22s. But some really good options there for a first gun for a child. If you're ready to move them up into a handgun, and again, I would want them more mature for the handgun for the long gun. But the gun I'm going to recommend for getting that kid into like the fundamentals of a handgun, there's a couple of different ones, but they all share a lot of commonality. So I'm going to recommend a single action 22 revolver. And there's a couple. If, again, your kid's not the kind of kid that takes care of stuff and is not going to clean it and oil it, and you just want one, and they're still good guns, the Heritage Rough Rider. I've used the Heritage Rough Rider to teach more people and more kids than I can honestly recall. They're a good gun, and they have an added benefit of not only are they a single action revolver, which means you have to cock the hammer, which means you can look as the instructor and see, is that hammer back or not, right? It has that, but it also has an additional safety. It's a revolver with a safety, right? So that's kind of a cool thing. So you get even more safety there. But that's a good option, that Heritage Rough Rider. They're not a lot of money. They're very affordable, especially for a handgun. And so you got that. You have the new on the scene, but they've been around a few years now, and they seem to work just fine. The Ruger Wrangler, which is kind of their budget version. And again, if your kid takes care of stuff and you want to get them something really nice that they'll probably treasure and maybe pass down to their kids, God willing, one of the other Rugers, like the Ruger Bearcat or the Ruger Single 6, those are really, really nice 22 single action revolvers. And the single action revolver, again, the hammer has to be back so you can look and see. If something really goes wrong, you can, put your thumb in between the hammer and the back of the cylinder. If they go to turn around or something like that. So you got a few things there going for you, and also, because you should be standing like right behind them when they're learning this stuff, you can reach your hand out and stop them. Keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Take control of that. Take control of the hammer. Also, they're slower to reload, right? So you don't want a kid, if they're just learning, in my opinion, just to blow through a bunch of ammo. Again, that's not the kind of shooter that I am, and not that can't be fun and they can't do that later, but it takes longer to reload. You have to unload those casings one at a time and load them one at a time. And getting familiar with loading and unloading a weapon is part of learning to be a shooter. And if you got let's say a brick of 500 rounds, it's going to give you a lot more time to train and shoot because it takes longer to reload, and the kid can think about what they've done, where they need to improve, as opposed to just blasting off rounds and reloading really quick. So I think all those reasons. And I don't think you'd regret, even when you're older, having a nice single action 22 revolver for when they want to take people to the range and just have fun. So those are my recommendations and my thoughts on that. So that's some recommendations there for getting the kids into shooting. The next one I'm going to talk about today is getting a kid into deer hunting. Now, first off, I'm going to tell you, if you or you want to get somebody else into hunting, I would recommend that you start with small game, right? I'm going to recommend you start with small game. That's always my recommendation for a grown man. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to be able to take more game, both legally and just by the abundance of game. You're going to learn how to skin animal, gut animal, things like that. I think it's better to learn on small game. But a lot of people really hone in on the deer hunting. We hunt a lot of things here in this country, but I think primarily we think of ourselves as deer hunters. So you've got somebody, a new shooter, a female, a youth that wants to get into deer hunting. My number one recommendation, and it's not just a young person's rifle, but it lends itself well to that, is going to be start with caliber and start with .243. .243 is a phenomenal caliber. Most of the rounds you're going to find at your local sporting goods store are going to be geared towards hunting deer. They're not all of them, but the vast majority of them. So it's got that going for it. It's an affordable round. It's an available round. There's a lot of rifles chambered in it. It's a good choice. And not just for them. I have taken, I don't know how many deer with a 243. I've taken elk with a 243. I'm not advising you do that. I'm really picky about my distance and my shot placement, but it's a good round, 243. It's a very effective round on deer size game, and it's low recoil. And it doesn't make it not effective because it's low recoil. It's a phenomenal round. It's also a good crossover round if you want to hunt coyotes, which are common now in most of the United States. And that's a good thing to learn on. It's a good round. That'd be my number one recommendation. My number two would be the 6.5 Creedmoor. And not because I want you shooting deer at 1,000 yards. I don't think you should start there. Or even necessarily that you have to go there unless you want to. But because it's also really common and it's also really forgiving in recoil. My hang up with this is my consternation about choosing this one is, unlike the 243, much of the ammo for it is geared towards target shooting, right? Which is not what you want. And for a new hunter, they might not know the difference. They may just go to Walmart or whatever big box store and just get a box of ammo and think, oh, it's not 243 as I was. It's 6.5 Creedmoor. It's a good deer cartridge. Therefore, this ammo is good for deer. And much of the 6.5 Creedmoor is geared towards target ammo. Target ammo is not the same as hunting ammo. But if you know enough about ballistics, I'm talking you as, or the person that you're getting this for, knows enough about ballistics to discern that, to say, hey, this bullet is constructed for deer or whatever you're hunting and not for target shooting, then absolutely, I would say the 6.5 is a great caliber. It's certainly a great deer size game caliber. So for hunting deer, it's a good choice. And if you hunt in more closed-in terrain, a woods carbine, that kind of gun, and again, if you like the history and kind of the cowboy side, a phenomenal choice, not just for a new shooter, but just of all time, but also good for a new shooter, is a 30-30 lever action. 30-30 is a phenomenal choice. I don't know what is the cartridge here in the United States that's put the most deer on the dinner tables of Americans, but if I was, picking one, the 30-30 would be as good a guess as any other. 30-30, 30-06 or whatever, but 30-30 is a great deer cartridge. The 150, the 170, again, most of that ammo, like the 243, is geared towards hunting and hunting deer. So you're pretty sure if you grab some of the ammo from Walmart or Sportsman's Warehouse or wherever, Academy, wherever you live, that it's likely to be good for deer. Also not a heavy recoiling round, and it can also just be fun to shoot a 30-30 lever action gun. And I think it's good to start on iron sights. Most bolt actions today sadly don't come with iron sights. So I think that 30-30 lever action is a good place to start. And you really have a couple of choices. The classic, if you want a really nice gun you're going to take care of, a classic Winchester Model 94, and or its rival, the Marlin 336. If you're going to want to mount an optic on it, a good scope, the Marlin lends itself better to that. So the Marlin 336, if you're going to mount a scope. I do think for fast handling iron sights, I do like the handling of the old classic Winchester Model 1894 a little bit better. But again, if you're going to want to mount an optic on it, I really would go probably with the Marlin. And then going back to the 243 and or the 6.5 Creedmoor, those are primarily going to be your bolt action guns. For the new shooter, I'm really going to recommend, depending on budget, the Savage Axis is a really good choice. Also, the Ruger American is a really good choice. Also, the Tikkas. I don't give them a lot of love. I know a lot of people love Tikka. For this is a great application for a Tikka. They also come in stainless, which I'm a big fan of, especially if you live in a little bit harsher climate or you're honest with yourself and or this person. They just don't take care of stuff as much, and stainless is really nice for that. So for that, those are really good choices. So I had a couple of other categories, but this is already going long. And I'm already almost back to the point where I have to start crossing roads with my Rhodesian Ridgeback Alexander Hamilton. And doing this and having him on a leash and all that stuff really is not conducive rather to good audio. So, sit. Anyway, for those reasons, I'm getting close to town. I'm going to cut this off. Maybe I'll continue the other categories another time. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Gunfighter Life for not gunfighters, for not gun people. Anyway, with that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day. Postscript. I'm going to do something a little bit different here. If you're not a patron, you probably don't know about all the content that gets posted on Patreon. I'm going to continue talking about this kind of stuff, advice, different categories. I think the first one I'm going to talk about is that intermediate handgun shooter with some experience and what I recommend for them. And I'll do some other categories. I'm going to record that and put it out on Patreon for free. All you have to do is click the Patreon link. I'm going to try and schedule it so that it comes out on the same day. The same day that this comes out, I'll put the content on Patreon, additional content talking about different categories and recommendations. All you have to do is scroll down and click the link for Patreon. You don't have to become a patron, you don't have to pay, but I'm hoping when you go there you'll see a bunch of that other hidden content and be intrigued. But if you want more of this, just click the link. You can go there for free and not become a patron. You don't have to click, you don't have to sign up, give your email address, none of that. You just literally click the link. If you're listening to this anytime close to when it comes out, you should be able to see the additional content about recommendations. So scroll down and hit that link in Patreon if you want more of this content for free. Thanks, and have a blessed day.